joining our weekly series on telehealth, failures, and secrets of success. Today, I'm just super excited. We have Dr. Habash as our thought leader in the series. I have known her for a while. She's just not only just amazing physician, amazing entrepreneur, just a fantastic person to be around with. And aside from her amazing list of accomplishments in there, so what you may not know is she's actually a very competitive tennis player and a big Trekkie. So if she were to go to Las Vegas, it would be for Star Trek convention and Comic Con. Again, we're just super excited to have Dr. Abash here. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. I'm not sure if you were supposed to tell everyone that or not, but
Some fun facts about you.
thank you for having me, Milton. I really appreciate it and everything you guys are doing with VSee. Um, I have to tell our viewers I was running between hospitals and I didn't think was going to have time to get to the office. And so I'm doing our talk in the car. So I apologize for that. But it actually is a testament to how busy doctors are and how we actually need a good telemedicine solution that we can use in a mobile way. So it may speak to the fact that we're talking about the merits of telehealth today.
Terrific. I think this will be, again, showing the life of the physician. In fact, I think today what I'm really excited is you as a very successful physician practicing telehealth in there. So just understanding the life that you lead, the life of experience and life, your insight you have.
Yeah. And the failures I've had, which from which I've learned. So,
Exactly. I guess, Dr. Habash, I would say maybe you can just share with you, maybe you could just share some of your thoughts with the PowerPoint presentation there. Then after that, we could just, yeah, answer some of the audience question, and we could just free form chat a little bit.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I prepared a few slides, and we'll go through them pretty quickly, just because I know this is going to be very thought-provoking, and we'll have a lot of audience questions. So we'll go through these pretty fast and open it up for questions afterwards.
Mhm.
So we can go to the first slide. Okay, that's my bio. So we can go to the next one. All right, I like this slide because if everyone remembers the Jetsons from 1962, they were portraying telemedicine in this screenshot. And it's very interesting because even back in 1962, they knew this was the future. This is where things were headed. So yeah, I really love this slide. I mean, this is happening currently, and they were able to predict it way back then. We can go to the next slide. Fun facts on telemedicine. So I'm sure a lot of people have never thought of this, but smoke signals were actually the earliest use of telemedicine. And African tribes would use them to keep other tribes away from their village when there was an outbreak of infectious disease or whatnot. So they would look at the smoke signals to be able to tell whether or not they should come to the village. First use of telemed. Prisons have used telemedicine very heavily since probably the early 2000s. And by their calculations, in just 1 year, 2004 alone, they saved taxpayers about $4 million. And that's because of the transportation costs that are associated with transporting prisoners. So anytime you can do telehealth from the facility itself, it's much better for the taxpayers and for the whole health system in general. Patients will make very bizarre sacrifices for telemedicine. Some said that they would skip shopping for a month, forego their next vacation, or skip showers for a week. I don't know which one we all are, but there are definitely some things that I would give up for telehealth. I just thought that was an interesting statistic. And the main telehealth users are working moms, business travelers, college kids. This was according to a Harris poll. And if you look at these statistics, 33% want to do telemedicine from their beds, which makes sense because they're sick, while they're at work, which also makes sense, while they're driving, which is sort of like me, except I'm not driving, I'm parked, while walking down the street, and while in the bathroom. So those are statistics from a real Harris poll. I'm pretty sure there were a bunch of people who weren't honest about where else they want to do telemedicine, but virtual visits will skyrocket to over 130 million by the year 2018. So even in the past couple of years, we've seen these telehealth visits skyrocket anyway. And so, they're just going to get more and more prevalent over time. Go to the next slide. Just a funny little quip here. Campfire's down. I can't send any messages. Call IT. Next slide. So I really like this slide because it shows the evolution of telemedicine. We can go back a little bit here. Okay. Milton, can you take over for just 1 second? There.
Yeah.
Yeah, just, I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem. Yeah.
Here you go. I'm back.
Okay.
Yeah, evolution of telemedicine is very interesting because over time we've learned that you don't need to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on robots and carts and all this fancy AV equipment. You know, before it was television producers who would have to enable telehealth because they had all these, webcams and microphones and all that to enable it. But nowadays, it's very simple. We can just use our phones or tablets or mobile devices, anything that has a front-facing camera, and our patients are so used to using these devices anyway with their grandchildren and when they're playing Candy Crush and that sort of thing. So even my super old cataract patients, I'm an ophthalmologist, are very used to FaceTiming with their grandkids. And when you tell them to use an app and do a telehealth visit, it's not a big deal to them anymore. They've really caught on. We can go to the next slide. So this is a very common question, and it's being answered every day. Providers ask all the time, why can't we just use our phones? And I'm sure everyone here is aware of HIPAA compliance issues. And that's what prompted us to develop these types of softwares that are HIPAA compliant, but are also very easy to use. And so anytime you can make something look and feel exactly like what people do on their native devices every day, there's obviously going to be a lot more adoption and more success in telehealth. We can go to the next slide. What are the best patient uses for telemedicine? I think consults are a great use case, and I practice at Bascom Palmer in Miami, and our facility is world famous. We see a lot of patients from all over the world who want to come for second opinions and consults. And these people save up their money and they travel, they take time off work, they bring their families in for things that really could have been done via a telehealth visit, or we could have instructed their at-home physician, what to do with that situation. And yes, there are some cases where we're not sure and we do have to bring them in, but at least they've had that initial assessment and we're able to give them an educated decision at that point. I really like it for follow-ups as well. In ophthalmology, I mean, just picture, and this works for any field of medicine, but I'm telling you from my own use cases, patients who come in with pink eye. We probably all had conjunctivitis at one point, and it's necessary to follow up in 1 week. But the patient's feeling better, they're at work, they don't want to miss work or get a babysitter or whatnot. It's very, very simple just to do a quick video call with the patient and assess how they're doing. So that's another very big use case. I use that a lot, and also in my post-operative patients where there's an incision, a visible incision. They just send me a picture. I can evaluate the incision, make sure it's clean, dry, and intact. We'll get into the reimbursement issues a little bit later, but that's actually very helpful because a lot of those visits are global, and you don't charge the patient for those visits anyway. They're not billable visits, but the patient still has to come in. They take a slot up on your appointment schedule, and so it's very handy to be able to do a follow-up visit that way. Patient check-ins such as mental health and wellness checks are becoming much more of an issue these days. Mental health has been proven time and time again in behavioral health. Those patients are very big beneficiaries of telehealth. And it's because, there are things that happen all hours of the night and on the weekends where the normal processes are not in place and they need help acutely. Transfers, again, another very big issue for me personally. We get a lot of patients from Haiti, from Jamaica, from other places in the state, and they're all transferred down to Bascom Palmer because we have, the biggest eye emergency room in the country. And a lot of times these patients just have something very simple that really didn't require a transfer. And when you think about the transfer and the hardship involved for the patient, for the family, the costs involved on the health system, that's a very important thing that we should be able to triage ahead of time from one facility to another and just get a clearer picture of what's going on with the patient. Right now, when we talk to the other facility, we're talking via telephone. and we're trying to, ascertain information just verbally. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, a video is worth 1,000 pictures. And anytime you can triage like that, you're saving everyone a lot of unnecessary anguish. The flip side is true too. There are some patients we see who really should have been transferred 2 days ago, but they weren't because nobody caught on to that condition. And so we can expedite those transfers as well. Patient monitoring, such as chronic conditions, clinical trials. We do a lot of work with some of the state and local government facilities and city ofs, because there are things like TB monitoring, where usually companies have to send out a nurse to go just make sure a patient has taken their TB medicine, their tuberculosis medicine, and they're in quarantine, so they can't come to an office or facility. And so imagine the costs that you're saving when you can just do a quick video call with the patient and make sure that they're taking their medicine and being compliant. We can go to the next slide. Milton, you stop me anytime if you have any questions or you want to generate a discussion there.
Sure, this is a really good. This is really good content.
Favorite things to talk about is our Mayo Clinic stroke study. This came about because of a statistic that said that 85% of patients who call 911 are actually never admitted to the hospital. They just needed help remembering which medicine to take, or they had minor issues that didn't require an admission. So those patients were taking away resources from patients who really did need them. And one of the perfect examples of that is a stroke patient. In medicine, we say time is brain when you're dealing with a stroke patient, because they lose about 1.8 million brain cells per minute. So anything you can do to cut down on that time to treatment, then you're saving the patient brain cells, and you're saving lives and money for the entire health system then. So what we ended up doing was a very easy, simple study. We just put an iPad with our HIPAA software on an ambulance and wanted to see if it was possible to triage a patient and do the NIH stroke scale with a Mayo Clinic neurologist. And what we found was that, yes, it's very feasible. In fact, not only was it feasible, but it also saved time from the door to needle time, which is the door to treatment time, the time the patient presents to the time they're given the clot busting medication that they need. We also decreased length of stay in the hospital, complications in the hospital, and a lot of money for the hospital system. Our setup was ridiculously simple. It was like $285 versus some of these $1.5 million setups, and our results were actually better. So lives and brain cells saved, priceless. I think that, in a couple of years, we're going to be doing this on a very regular basis. I mean, we're talking about this now like it's a novel idea, but within the next couple of years, I think every critical patient will be triaged and followed in transit while they're on their way to the hospital, so that orders can get started and OR teams can be called in, and everything can be prepared by the time the patient does hit the ER. So we'll go to the next slide. How common is telemedicine? 72% of hospitals now offer some sort of telemedicine. And it used to be sort of a novel idea, but now it's very commonplace. And it's almost like if you're not doing it, then you're behind the trend. So I thought that was a very important statistic. 52% of physician groups are offering it. And I was reading a statistic just the other day that said that 65% of patients would actually change providers to someone who is offering telemedicine, because that's, patients are becoming more consumers these days. We'll just be honest about it. And so they're demanding these types of efficiencies and conveniences. We can go to the next slide. So how do you roll it out to patients in your practice? And I think, this is probably why a lot of people signed on for this webinar today. I mean, it's pretty simple. Imagine you have a private practice or any sort of, ambulatory care practice. How do you market anything in your practice, anything that's new? You put brochures around the office, you have your staff informed. I put it in all my patient registration forms, and it's always like a happy announcement. Congratulations, your doctor now does telemedicine. And it's something that they should look forward to, because now their doctor, is active and is on trend with all the newest technology, and they feel very empowered that their doctor is able to offer them this. And again, a lot of these patients are switching providers to someone who is, or they're going to these outsourced types of companies where they can just get a quick acute visit online rather than their own doctor. I mean, any time of the day, I would rather keep my patients in-house, and I would rather be able to treat my patients and do that service for them rather than lose them or have them go to someone else who is offering an online service and may or may not know them and know the condition and be able to follow up with them, which I think is very important in telemedicine. So rolling it out to your practice, I mean, again, just very simple, brochures and patient registration forms, and it's very important to have your staff, educate the patients as well. I have download instructions, and so anytime we give this to the patient, we just have very simple download instructions. We give them the sheet. My girls will, sometimes if we see that someone's going to have trouble or something, we'll kind of work with them, make sure they download it, log on properly, and we'll send them a test text to make sure that, everything's working. And it's funny because they all have that sort of aha moment, like, oh, wow, okay, this is exactly like what I'm already doing with my grandkids. And it's a very, like, happy moment for them. We can go to the next slide. How do you document telemedicine visits in the EHR? So everyone is always asking about this, but how do you document a face-to-face visit? Exactly the same way. And so, those visits are not recorded. There's no uploading your face-to-face visit into the EMR. Don't complicate it by thinking about it like that. Just think about it exactly like the same as you would do for a face-to-face visit. When my workflow, at least, and everyone has a different workflow, but mine is, I talk to the patient, I'm examining, my scribe is inputting all the data into my EMR system. That way I'm spending face time with the patient rather than with the computer screen, and just reporting, my observations, and my tech or my scribe is writing down everything. So everything's documented and ready to go, and I'm spending time with the patient. It's exactly the same way I would suggest people do it when they're doing a telehealth visit as well. So we can go to the next slide. And just going back to that really quick, I'm so sorry, but to get more specific about the workflow, let's say I have that conjunctivitis patient that I've now scheduled for a follow-up e-visit. I will have the front desk, when the patient is leaving, I have them put on the schedule just like they would any normal visit. At a certain time, my girls will give them the download instructions. We actually do a confirmation the day before, just like any other regular patient, and make sure they're still available at that time, send a test text, and then at the time of the visit, my scribe or my technician will get them on the video. They'll do the initial, like, chief complaint, history, present illness, whatnot, and then when they're ready for me to do the exam part of the exam and discussion part of the visit, I'll come on. They'll just hand me the office iPad. I come on, do my visit, go about my business. Very simple. We can go to the next slide. Malpractice and telemedicine. I have yet to find a malpractice insurance that won't cover telemedicine. I'm sure there are some out there, but even our ophthalmology insurance does cover telemedicine visits. And there are no caveats with it, and I haven't run into any extra costs involved. It's just a covered service with the malpractice insurance. We can go to the next slide. Telemedicine reimbursement and private payers. This is the meat and potatoes of everything. There is a certain thing called a telemedicine parity law, and what that means is that states are dictated to pay the same for an e-visit as they would for a face-to-face visit. If your state has a parity law, then all the private payers should reimburse you. There's an updated statistic now. It's not 32 states. It's gone up to 37 states since I made these slides a few months ago. Plus, DC now have parity laws. And again, these are laws that say that the private payers should pay for telemedicine. The big five are Blue Cross, Cigna, Aetna, Humana, and United Healthcare. Every state has some sort of Medicaid coverage as well, and that includes for pediatric care. I still tell people to verify telemedicine coverage by calling the payer directly. There are still some subsets of plans which might have certain stipulations, but for the most part, if your state has a parity law, all of those payers, the private payers, should reimburse you, and the reimbursement should be 100% of the code billed, the same as a face-to-face visit. The caveat is that it needs to be a live video telemedicine visit. So a patient can't send me a picture of a red eyeball and say that's telemedicine. It has to be a real-time, face-to-face, HIPAA-compliant means of communication. Reimbursement is for any E&M service, any consult code. It can be for a new patient, follow-up patient, mental health, and chronic care management as well. The coding is very simple. You use whatever CPT code you normally use in a visit, 99204 or 92012, which is an I code, and a GT modifier on it. The GT is what tells the insurance company this was an e-visit. Reimbursement, again, is 100% of the code billed. So we can go to the next slide. I'm sure that's going to generate a lot of questions. We'll come back to it. And we're pretty much nearing the end here. So this slide is just meant to show that, we're going to have a lot of trial and error with this. And Elon Musk had to crash a few rockets before he got one to stick or to fly. And, pretty soon, again, this is how we're going to be able to do things. But right now, we're paving the way, and we're making mistakes, and we're learning from them. And that's okay, and everyone is going to have a different way of doing things. You're going to crash and burn sometimes, but again, that's fine. That's what makes us learn from all these experiences. So I would just suggest people, keep trying until they get it right. And then the very last slide. Go ahead. Use telemedicine because only actors smile in waiting rooms. So true.
Dr. Harbaugh, thank you so much for that great presentation. It was actually really insightful in there. But the one thing you mentioned is you actually use remote scribe. You use scribe to that. Is this a physical scribe or is this a remote scribe?
No, I use physical scribes because I don't need them to grab me a culture kit or grab me something, and I utilize them for many different things. But yes, there are remote scribes as well. And I've heard people have great success with them too.
Okay, got it. I just think using Scribe makes so much sense. That it's almost like I wonder why don't more doctors actually do this?
Oh, because it's so much better documentation. Even if I document myself, it would just never be as good as someone. I don't think it would be as good as someone else doing it real time. Plus, the most important thing is for me to spend time with the patient rather than the computer screen. So I just find that everything's a lot more tidy and documented. I still go back over everything afterwards, but the majority of them is there, and I just it once I go back in.
Got it. That makes sense there. But then, so you mentioned about the reimbursement, all these things in terms of the 37 states, the DC, and so on. I guess, but we all have heard from some other physician, in practice they have some issues, like the insurance. Like from your practice, did you have any issues where getting reimbursed was just smooth?
No, I'm in Florida, and we are one of the only states, sadly, that does not have a parity law. But what I do for my patients, though, is I just have them sign an exclusion of benefits form.
Okay.
And they are so happy to pay, a fee in order to have this convenience. Because if you think about it, parking at the building is $11. Yeah. They're taking time off work. They're getting a babysitter. They're sitting in traffic. They're sitting in my waiting room for an hour for what really is like a 5-minute follow-up visit. And, the patients are very happy to pay that kind of premium. Again, patients are really turning consumers these days, and we need to stay with the trend.
Got it. That makes sense.
Great service.
That makes sense. So then do you work, so for example, in the different area, like for example, the urgent care, so we see, for example, because a lot of this online service pressure, you pay about roughly about $49 to visit. Then if you do an in-person visit, a lot of time often you can charge about double of that in there. So we see that sometimes urgent care, they don't offer time because they're worried about now if they offer this one, then it's going to cannibalize. So fewer patients will come in person. Now they can actually decrease their the financial in there. Do you find that in your practice or that's not?
I control sort of what visits I think are amenable for it. So, if it's a quick follow-up visit, let's say global visit that I wasn't going to charge for anyway, they are very happy to not get out of their beds because they've just had surgery and they have this incision. They would gladly pay a little bit extra just to have that sort of convenience. So that's one. Another one is sometimes it's just more beneficial to me to not have them on my schedule, to replace that with a new patient, for instance, rather than a quick follow-up for conjunctivitis that I'm getting the minimal coding for anyway. And so, that fee ends up being less. A
Okay.
lot of, I've tried to do sort of Medicare allowable rates so that I can keep things very consistent all the way through.
Got
And
it. Okay. Okay.
it's important for patients, we shouldn't have to compete with these online services, $49 or whatever. We shouldn't devalue our services
Yeah.
because we're their physicians. We know them. We know the history. We're going to do the follow-up. And this is oftentimes not a substitute for a visit. It's an adjunct or an enhancement to it. And so we can't discount ourselves by trying to compete with these online services.
Yeah, I love what you're saying because ultimately is I think that people love good physician that they should actually pay the thing. Otherwise, it's like you get this thing, it's almost like physician get even more squeeze in there. Then it's just like it's really not that's I think what the industry should be. But Dr. Abad, you also mentioned in your talk that so like the pretty much all the malpractice insurance that were covered for telemedicine. Was that something you have to sort of select? For just by default, like you don't even need to do anything as a physician. Is that covered? Like, what's your insight on that?
Yeah, so whenever you do your renewals, there is there's a section that says, do you do cosmetic services, or do you do telehealth? And so it usually is now listed in that questionnaire when you're doing your mal you know re reapplication.
Got it. Excellent. How about in terms of that, like you mentioned, you also have patients from Latin America and so on. And do you have to do anything special if you're going to, see international patients in terms of your malpractice?
A lot of places don't have HIPAA laws or that sort of thing, and a lot of the international patients are cash pay anyway, so it's
Okay.
actually pretty easy. There are some restrictions in practicing. I mean, there's very few restrictions in practicing internationally, but I know Malaysia is one of those places where you have to have a license in the country of Malaysia to practice in order to do a consult. So there are a few stipulations, but for the most part, you know. I would say the international patients are more sort of cash pay anyway, so you don't have to follow a lot of those billing and reimbursement rules.
Okay. But I guess, but what about in terms of your personal, like the malpractice piece, does that cover your international patient, or do you have to get a special add-on to just like see these are international patients?
No, there's no blank that says, "Do you see international patients?"
Okay.
We all do. So no, they're once they've signed that patient contract with you, that
Okay.
patient registration, they're your patient no matter where they live.
Okay. Super. Okay. Nice. Okay. We have a question from Jonathan, Dr. From the audience. He said, so how do you see the use case for occupational health for like sort of return to work examples in terms of
Mhm.
tele
Yeah, I think ortho, occupational health, those types of things are actually are great use cases, because those patients sort of need long-term, rehabilitatory care, and there are a lot of things that you can do. Let me see you walk, let me see you, bend your arm or raise your leg or whatnot, and you can make a very educated assessment based on that. So I do see it used quite a bit for ortho follow-ups and for occupational physical therapy and occupational health.
Okay, that makes sense. I have another question from the audience, Will. So he's asking us, so do you find that most providers see telemed as for another software bundle, like another like almost a big-headed like the EMR thing that the industry going through in there, and not a utility to sort of maybe increase revenue opportunities? Like, how do you see that?
Yeah, no, of course. There are there are some people who do think that way, and they don't have to do it if they don't want to. They can be part of the 30% that is not doing telemedicine. But my whole goal in life basically now is to make things easier and better for doctors and for patients, because the way medicine has been headed, yes, things have been thrown at us that we hate and that just make our lives more miserable, and those of our patients as well. And so anything I can do to sort of streamline workflows and efficiencies and decrease costs for everyone, and generate revenue as well and do better patient care, I'm all for that. And I'm a staunch supporter that telehealth does offer that opportunity. I think that, with time, those people will just learn that, um, you know, like anything, it can be misused, but it needs to be done in a very responsible manner. You are still the patient's physician. You're the one who calls the shots. If you think that you're not going to be able to see something or assess something properly, it's up to you to bring them in, just like you would, or just send them to the ER or whatever. And we can't forget that we're doctors, and those decisions, we make those decisions every day anyway. And I would venture to say that a lot of times those decisions are made over a phone call when we really don't have all the facts anyway. That happens 100 times a day. Patients call the office and my receptionist screens them for me. It's way better when I'm the one doing it, for them as well.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. So we have another question about Jacqueline. So she's worried about, so for example, when you're talking about so doing telemedicine, so she is a mental health practitioner. So she's worried about, for example, there are these sort of technical glitches, if the video freeze, maybe the audio dropout, or like network, whatever in there. And again, this was sort of like interrupt the session in there. So she's sort of worried about that might be like just a big distraction to the things. And what's your experience on?
I mean, we've been talking now for 32 minutes. There's no freeze, there's no dropout. The quality is great. And I really have not found that to be much of an issue. There are, obviously sometimes if you're traveling or going from one Wi-Fi to another, you may have a little dropout or a little freeze, but I've never seen it impede anything. And certainly when you're doing, a scheduled telehealth visit, the patient is in a place where there is good Wi-Fi or LTE or something like that. And if the technology, I mean, most of the technologies these days are very reliable. I haven't had that as much of an impediment at all.
Okay, nice. So I have another question from Jeff. So he's asking like, so what type of patients will pay like a monthly fee, like for the sake of convenience, like alone?
So it's probably the same people that the Harris poll pegged as the biggest users of telehealth: young professionals, working moms. College students do it a lot too, and it doesn't have to be a huge fee, but I think that people are starting to value their time and the transit time as well. And when you do the math, a lot of times it is way less expensive overall to do a telehealth visit. I have lots of young professionals in my practice, and they're traveling a lot. They will wake up in foreign cities with a red eye and freak out, and calling me and being able to have that sort of, continuity of care even when they're out of town and they don't want to go to a foreign ER or to see another doctor that they don't know. That even one experience like that is invaluable to a patient, and it'll breed loyalty for the rest of their lives, and it's just better patient care.
Okay, nice. Okay, then there's a follow-up question from Jeff is like, what's your intuition on terms like how much like that fee, like the monthly fee could be that patients are willing to pay for it?
I don't do it by monthly fee. I just do it by visit.
Yeah.
I am sure if some people have a more heavy telemedicine only practice or a virtual office or something like that, they could do a fee. Typically, the concierge practices that I see are charging about $2,500 per year.
Okay.
It would include a telehealth service.
Okay, that makes sense in there. So we have another question from Jacqueline. So she says, so she's in Canada. So in Canada, they're not allowed to see clients outside of Canada if you want to be covered by the insurance. I guess, are you saying that in that case, it's like you could see it, or maybe that's something specific to some Canada legislation?
Is it? Oh, it's their national health insurance, right? Yeah, I think so. But those patients, I have so many patients from Canada because they're waiting 6 months for cataract surgery.
Okay.
So they just private pay in that case.
God, how about, do you know anything? This might be honest. What about if you're a physician actually in Canada yourself in there? Is there any restriction to sort of see patients like outside of Canada?
I honestly don't know. I'm not sure what the are, but I will have to brush up on that.
Okay, that's fine in there. We have another question from Aideen. So regarding you mentioned about the parity laws in there. So does it also include for physical therapy?
It's billed by provider. So if your therapist can bill for a regular visit, then they can bill for a telehealth visit as well. So it
Okay.
does include I believe it does include physical therapists. I'm not familiar with the paramedical professionals and what how much they're allowed to bill, but if you can bill for a regular visit, can also bill for telehealth. ARMPs, for instance, nurse practitioners can bill as well.
Okay, nice in there. I got so another question from the audience, and Dane. So do you have any? So he's asking like, do you have any experience with telemedicine in the rural area, and specifically, and so he's worried about like in those areas you might not have that much great bandwidth in there, so does it work in practice?
So I am from rural West Virginia. Yeah, and and you would not believe the hardships people face to get into a facility. There's just not enough doctors around there, and it's so hard for them to come in. A lot of them don't have cars. They have four kids and they can't leave them. There's so many hardships that we don't even account for. A lot of times, they'll get food stamps or Medicaid will pay for a taxi ride or something like that in order to get them in. But, once we started telemedicine there, it was life changing for these people because even though they don't have a car, they have a cell phone, and they have a camera. And, when their kid has a rash, my dad's a pediatrician and he does so many telehealth visits there because, when the kid wakes up with a rash or distressed breathing or something like that, and they're able to do a quick consult with their pediatrician, and he's able to tell them, oh, I can call something in for you, or you need to rush to the emergency room right away. We can't even put a price on how valuable that is for those patients.
Okay, got it. That makes a lot of sense. So in terms of basically from your experience from that, there's really no technical barriers in terms of like, like people have the right camera or microphone or
You
like
don't
network.
I mean, if you have a mobile device, you don't need the right camera, the right microphone. That's the
Yeah.
whole point. And yes, there are desktop versions of things, but I would stay away from that. Just leave it as simple as possible. There are certainly areas that don't have good signal or good reception. If your kid is sick, you're going to go to an area that does have reception, and you're going to make that call.
Yeah, that
You know,
makes
on,
sense.
yeah, honestly, like the benefits, far outweigh any of those connectivity issues.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I have another question for Jonathan. So he's asking like, sort of, how do you manage or ration the access to you? Because one of the things, for example, some of these are for telemedicine. What if you just get like flooded with requests? Do you have like some sort of scheduling platform, or how do you just like manage to keep the flood out of my meetings?
That's an awesome question. Um, Everyone has a slightly different way of doing things. Some people will have a designated person to handle all those,
Mhm.
incoming, calls or visits or whatever. At Bascom Palmer, we have a third party that handles them and schedules them for us. There are software platforms, telehealth platforms that have scheduling integration in them. Personally, for my, relatively lower volume sort of practice outpatient practice setting, I've found that it's best to initiate the calls yourself. And so I just tell the patient still calls the office the same way they do normally. When they wake up with an eye that's swollen shut, they call my front desk, and now instead of my front desk saying, well, I'm not sure what's going on, she offers them a telehealth visit. My tech will get them set up. I come to the office, I come to the iPad, do the quick assessment, we're done. And so that's how I control things. I always tell them to contact the office rather than,
Got
the telehealth system.
I think that makes perfect sense. That makes,
But
yeah.
every will have a slightly different way of doing things. But that was
Yeah.
a really, because that is a concern.
Yeah. So I have another question from Reich. So he's asking, so for the telehealth practice to the patient, do they have any sign, any things like any special form like advanced beneficiary notice or anything, just waiver or before like they would get into a CEO?
Yeah, so again, I have it in my patient registration. When we announce telehealth, we say, would you like to have access to this app? Or, the software, which is an app. And so we have them sign there. Yes, I have a consent form that I have them sign as well. The ABN, the Advanced Beneficiary Notice, comes into play when you're not going to bill insurance. Or when it's a non-covered service under the insurance. And so anything that you want to do, if you want to, sell them anything, if you want to have any sort of concierge service, they have to sign an ABN anyway. And so this is another one of those times.
Got it. Okay. So I have another question from Charles. So he's asking like, do you use any special camera or microphone or lighting for your, the reason I think the question is a lot of time, right? If you think about like the TV, the people, they have really beautiful lights, so the physician looks just like the people looks amazing. Versus sometimes if you use like a, maybe iPhone, iPad in there, you don't have the great lighting, then do you do those things in your practice?
No, I don't have a studio in the practice. Like I said, my visits are basically between patients when I'm in the hallway. They'll hand me the iPad. It's almost, analogous to a FaceTime call or what we're doing right now. You pretty much see everything you need to see. If you don't, you have them send a picture, you have them, zoom in or whatever, the case may be. But no, I don't do anything fancy. I mean, I keep it very simple, and it meets my needs at least. There are going to be some cases where, you do want a pan-tilt zoom sort of camera and whatever, and those are much more sophisticated setups in health systems. For outpatient practices, I just don't see any reason you need to do anything more fancy than a mobile device.
Got it. Okay, that's a great answer there. So I have another question. This was someone who unfortunately couldn't be here in person, but she was so excited she asked me to make sure I ask you this. So in their cases, how do you, for example, there's like when you do remote telemedicine, sometimes you couldn't maybe have the right device in terms of medical exam or things. Like, how do you figure out that gray area between like, here's a case that maybe really should be seen in person versus telemedicine? Like how do you go deciding, here's the cases, I'm going to do telemedicine. Here's a case, you're going to come in. Do you, like, is there a clinical protocol? Do you write down, well, how did you go about making those decisions?
No, I mean, again, you're the physician, you fall back on your expertise. And if I see that there's a young professional with very uncomplicated issue like a STI or something like that, where I know medical legally I have to close the loop and see him again, but he's going to be fine in a week and I don't want to inconvenience him, that's the kind of patient I will offer it to. You don't
Okay.
offer somebody who, you're afraid might have a retinal detachment or something more serious, or someone, you think might not be compliant. So you just have to make that decision, just like we do 100 times a day about other medical issues.
Got it, got it. So you basically, you as the physician, you making these sort of like,
You're the
yeah.
point of contact, exactly. And like I said before, oftentimes it's really our receptionists who are making a lot of these decisions. A patient calls in with an issue, they're making the determination if they can bring them in today or next week, or if they don't need to come in at all. Or if they just leave you a message that you get to at the very end of the day. And so you're relying on, receptionists a lot of times to do these types of triages that really should be done by a
Okay.
physician.
Got it, got it, got it. I really appreciate it there. But in your talk, you mentioned something like the marketing, just letting your patient know these sort of services. I thought that was really insightful. For example, did you find between the different mechanisms, because one of the reasons I asked is we find a lot of people who offer telemedicine, they get very excited, they offer this, then actually utilization is quite low in there, then almost a little bit disappointed they go through all this effort, or people are not flooding into the things. Like between the different, you mentioned about, noticing, like, is there a certain type of method you recommend as a way to a physician to let the most effective way to market the service to their patient versus some other method maybe is less effective?
Yeah, I found that a lot of the practices that we implement, the most successful ones are when they have a champion in the office who's not just the physician.
Okay.
The office manager, the head technician, someone else to facilitate these things.
Okay.
Have someone helping the patient sort of set them up and reminding the doctor, reminding the staff that this is an offered service. It's not as successful.
Got
Just
it. Got it.
because they just revert to what they've been doing for years and years.
Okay. I guess, do you, in terms of the patient, do you just like every person who come to visit, do you give them like a notice? Now you can see my telemedicine. Do you email them? What do you do? Like even like these were like Facebook or other advertising to like letting people know that you have the service available? Or
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's on the website. We do, spam emails or whatever, group emails to the practice. It's all over. It's brochures in my waiting room,
okay.
in the exam rooms, that sort of thing.
Got it. Great. So, Dr. Haba, you shared like many really insightful things in there. If you were to say like, if the audience can learn like only one thing from you today, like what would you consider like the most absolutely important thing that the audience should learn?
Um, I think again, technology and medicine are intertwined, and medicine is just, it's so far behind a lot of other types of industries. And it shouldn't be. It should be at the forefront of these industries, and a lot of these technologies are things that we've been doing for a long time in other industries. I just think that if there's one take-home message, it is that our patients deserve to have access to something this valuable. And it helps us, it helps our patients, it helps the whole health system for the most part when done responsibly. And I think that would be the take-home message, is that don't look at this as an impediment, look at this as just such a valuable resource for our patients.
Okay, makes sense. So my as the final wrap up, maybe the two more questions there before wrap up is what so so you've been doing telehealth for a long time, and then you've been also then on top of being a physician, you're also a very successful entrepreneur in there. Like, is there something within telehealth that you believe, some insight you have, that the rest of the world do not believe yet?
um, until you've done your first telehealth visit and you've really helped a patient who otherwise wouldn't have been helped, you can't appreciate the power of it. And I've said time and time again, so many practices or so many health systems where we go to implement, and there are naysayers and there are people doubters, and they've done that. I've seen people who've turned around from being, such a naysayer to one of the biggest proponents because they've been able to help a patient, and that is so powerful. Yeah, that would be my that's my insight about that.
It's almost like you believe the power of telehealth and telemedicine is even more powerful than these sort of analysts, whatever they write up.
Yeah.
And then the final question I have for you is, so again, so right now there's like, the like in the capital, the raging policy debates on healthcare and so on. So if you could plant or three thoughts into President Donald Trump's in there, like what are some of the things you would like to determine a policy change, whatever in the new healthcare bill they should have?
Number one, take care of your doctors. Because, yeah, the majority of us, we care. 99% of us care, and we stay up at night thinking about our patients, and it's our this is our identity, and I feel like over time doctors have been discounted and cut out and replaced, and it's just not right. Not just doctors but any healthcare provider. We go through a lot for our patients. We care, and I think that's the take-home message he needs to hear. For one. Number two, is I would love to see the next time he gets a runny nose and has to go see a doctor versus a telehealth visit.
Okay, we'll send the flyer out. Okay.
If he can sit in his Oval Office and do a telehealth visit, I guarantee you he will choose it every single time.
Got it. Then do you have a third thing you will plant in his head? Or
Yes. Again, infuse more technology into medicine because, that's where it's really necessary. When we can sit on an airplane and have a pick list and such high-tech, entertainment options, but with our doctor's offices, we don't have any technology like that. I mean, it's a and so, yeah, that would be the third point is let's try harder to infuse better technology, not just any technology, but better technology.
got it. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Dr. Habad. By the way, we also got a bunch of additional questions from the audience. By the audience, I apologize. We couldn't get to all your questions, but again, we'll make these questions available to Dr. Habad so she can answer. We're going to post everything online. You are going to get your answers respond again. So thank you so much for the audience for tuning in to this week. And thank you so much, Dr. Habad, for sharing your insight. I thought that was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you for